everybody? Welcome into the boxing scene today. Virgil Ortiz versus Erickson Lubin pre-show. That's right. We're going to be not just be talking about the fight, breaking it down, getting word from the experts. We'll also have some guests on to talk about the ins and outs, the X's and O's of a very influential fight at 154 pounds. The winner in a perfect spot in a red-hot division. Well, we're not in studio. We're at home. That's right. It's going to be a pre-show from 7 to 8. And then, of course, go to the zone, watch the fight, and then afterward, we're doing a post-fight show right here on ProBox TV. As always, Jimmy Smith alongside the champs, Chris Algieri and Paulie Malignaggi. Chris Algieri, by the way, has his red wine. Paulie has his Mexican Coke. They are ready to go. Nobody brought me anything in my home studio. What must be nice, guys. Must be nice to live like that. So anyway, first thing I want to talk about, Chris, is the surprise level of this fight. Remember, it was supposed to be Lubin fighting for the IBF title. I believe it was Murtaza Aliyev. That ended up falling through. He ends up getting Virgil Ortiz, who is perhaps the most avoided guy at 54. Why? Big, very hard puncher, and in his physical prime. Are you surprised this fight came together when it did, Chris?
No, I'm not, because after speaking to Lubin multiple times and actually speaking to Ortiz and all these guys, it just made logistical and financial sense, but also in terms of the profile of this fight. Murtaza Aliyev, yes, he's a champion. Yes, Lubin wants to be a world champion. He has yet to be a world champion. I think at this point of his career, he's looking for a profile boost more than anything. And I think that's a really smart move, because a win here puts him into title contention in the hottest division in the world. Ortiz, one of the baddest men at 154. So if he's able to get a victory over here, which if you really look at this fight, there's a strong possibility. I know Vegas doesn't think so, but in terms of the way these guys stylistically match up, this is a really interesting fight. And this is one of those tactical, strategic, managerial moves by Team Lubin to step into a fight against Virgil Ortiz rather than going right for the title for the IBF against Murtaza Aliyev. But in terms of the profile and the reach and who's going to actually view this fight, I think this is a really smart move. Hopefully, or potentially, this could work out for them. We'll see. But Ortiz is no pushover. It's amazing that these two guys do not have world titles. This is not a world title fight, but everyone in the world, everyone at 154 is tuning into this fight because of the implications of where the winner can go from here.
Now, Paulie, when you look at this, of course, do you see this as kind of boxer versus puncher? Is that like a way maybe a casual fan would see it? Both guys can box. Both guys have knockout power. But a lot of times, a lot of people are seeing Lubin as the boxer and Ortiz as the puncher in this fight.
Yeah, your general thinking would be that, Lubin is a more athletic fighter, speedy, Ortiz is a bit flat-footed, but both are very technically sound. I also think that, you can interchange a little bit of it as well, because Lubin, although he has a lot of athleticism, he won't shy away from getting into a shootout, so to speak. We saw that in the Fundora fight, in a fight where both guys were on the canvas. It was very exciting. So Lubin, for all his athleticism, is also a gutsy guy who will actually go for it and doesn't shy away from a fight. The question is, has he been through the wood chipper too much? Is he a little bit shop worn? And we know he's not that old, but he's been in a lot of good, tough fights. That's the only fear. Because Ortiz, okay, he can box a little bit. He's more the pressure guy. But we've seen Ortiz use that jab as well. So, again, like I said, traditionally, Lubin the boxer, Ortiz the pressure guy. But we've seen them also have the other ability as well. So I think this fight could debilitate into a very physical matchup in certain points. Like I said, the only question for me is, what does Lubin has left? Yes, he just turned 30 years old. It's not that old, but he's been in some very tough fights. Win or lose, he's been in some very tough fights. He's been a name in boxing. Matter of fact, I want to touch on the point you made with Murtaza Aliyev. Murtaza Aliyev has the IBF light middleweight title. Lubin chose to take the Ortiz fight instead of the Murtaza Aliyev fight. If you really think about it, Murtaza Aliyev doesn't have a lot of notoriety. A lot of people avoid him. He's a rugged guy from Eastern Europe. And in reality, yes, Lubin would get a title shot, but Lubin would do a lot for Murtaza Aliyev as well, because he would bring a profile to Murtaza Aliyev that Murtaza Aliyev needs. So it's kind of give and take if you would have made the Lubin and Murtaza Aliyev fight, because Murtaza Aliyev may need Lubin more than Lubin needs that world title, if you really think about it, But this Virgil Ortiz fight, I think, does a lot for Lubin. It does a lot for Ortiz. And plus, we're in the Western Hemisphere where both guys have a big profile and both guys have a lot of notoriety. So I think everybody's going to be tuning in for this one.
And remember, it's in Ortiz's backyard. It's in Fort Worth, Texas. Well, about the X's and O's of this, I have a great coach, Stephen Breadman Edwards. Thank you so much for joining us, man. When you look at this fight, as Paulie said, a lot of ways to dice it up. Is it boxer versus puncher? Well, yeah, but Ortiz can box as well. Lubin, although 30 years old, has been through some very tough fights. What does he have left in the tank? There's so many ways to see this fight. How do you see it?
Well, first off, I got as much as respect for Lubin as anybody currently in boxing. That kid has taken some really, really tough fights, like beyond tough. You know, I know you got Paulie and Chris on here, and Paulie and Chris took some tough fights. So I know they can appreciate a kid like Lubin. I mean, they say Lubin is chinny, but he don't shy away from fighting punchers. I mean, he has taken some incredibly tough fights. I don't know if I view this as boxer versus puncher, because I think Lubin can punch too, actually. And I think Virgil Ortiz, believe it or not, he boxes going forward. He has a really good jab. So, you know, I got my own little personal theory on that. To me, the guy who's the puncher in the fight is the guy that can take the other guy's punches the best. You know, for example, when Holyfield fights Tyson, even though Tyson may hit harder than Holyfield in the overall spectrum, for some reason, Holyfield can take Tyson's punches better than Tyson can take his punches. So Holyfield's the puncher when they fight. So I got to kind of see how they line up, you know, before I say who's the boxer and who's the puncher. But I think it's a terrific matchup because both of them have killer mentalities. Both guys try to, you know, they come to get it. Both guys, you know, they don't shy away from, they don't try to dull the fight down. So that's why I'm looking forward to this fight.
Yeah, when you look at, for example, the Sebastian Fundora fight, a guy whose build is an absolute nightmare for everybody at 54, it was Lubin who scored the later knockout before, as Chris puts it, his face kind of gave up on him. It wasn't a matter of, you know, as you said, being chinny. It was, you know, got stopped because of the damage he was taking to his face. When you look at that intensity, where he came back from a knockdown to knock down Fundora later on in the fight, that shows a ton of heart for Lubin. To you, Breadman, are people overlooking that?
I think they are. I saw the odds. I just got a call from somebody really important in boxing, and Ortiz is like minus 1,000, which is 10-1, and Lubin is like
that's crazy. It's crazy.
plus 650. And Chris, here's the funny part: did everybody forget about the Boachuk fight?
Yeah.
I mean, like it's like
I see what you're putting down, Brett, man. I'm with you, man.
Yeah,
I'm with you because shades and power are relative.
And also it's Ortiz's chin at 154. It's a little bit different. And Ortiz's power at 154. It's not. It's still respectable, but it's not quite as devastating. So,
hey, Paulie, he's moved up 3 weight classes. He started out at 140. Then he went to 47, and then he went to 54. And listen, I'm not saying he's not going to win this fight. I'm not saying that, because I honestly think that the odds are so stacked against Lubin, he's going to have to turn into Sugar Ray Leonard mixed with Floyd Mayweather to pull this fight off.
But Brett, it's also in Texas where you don't get a decision, even if Lubin was.
Paulie, listen, I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to say that because I got.
I'll say it because I have experience in Texas myself.
You fought Juan Diaz in Texas. Yeah. You fought Juan Diaz in Texas, and then you had to rematch him somewhere else to get a fair shake. So now you got Lubin in Texas on a Golden Boy card against a pressure fighter, and something else, Chris, and I think you're gonna be able to relate to this. When you beat Ruslan Provodnikov, everybody didn't give you credit because you boxed that fight. And for some reason, it was a lot of people saying, you know, maybe he won, maybe he lost. And I felt like they tried to steal a little bit of your joy with that fight. And Lubin beat Jesus Ramos by boxing. He said, you know what? I'm not going to slug. I'm going to be smart. I'm going to box this fight. And all I kept hearing was that he got a gift and this, that, and the other. And I'm only bringing that up because of the circumstances with this fight. I personally don't believe he can fight a Golden Boy fighter, a pro-Mexican crowd, a come-forward fighter in his hometown and box the way he did with Ramos and get a decision.
And his hometown being Dallas, Texas.
Yes, I don't believe he can get a decision. And if he slugs, I don't know if that's the best thing for him. So while I think
rocking the hard place a little bit, rocking the hard place. You know, you box. You don't get a
decision.
So let me
pose this question.
Hey, Jimmy, listen. This is one of the circumstances that Lubin is in this fight. I hope he's getting paid well, because this is very tough circumstances to pull a fight off, man.
Brett, I'm gonna pose this question to you as well. Do you think he can box like he did against Ramos in a safety first? I think Ortiz is a better pressure fighter than Ramos. I think Lubin is going to get, wind up in a shootout in at least some portions of this fight, because Lubin himself has a lot of heart and doesn't shy away from shootouts. Remember the Fundora fight? Fundora, he got himself into a shootout kind of a fight, and both guys were down in that fight. So although he can box like he did in the Ramos fight, I don't know if Ortiz is going to allow him to box like that, because Ortiz's pressure is very high level.
You know what, Paulie? That's a good observation. There's certain guys that you can box, and there's certain guys that kind of make you fight. And Ortiz has more frenetic pressure than Ramos. Ramos is a little bit methodical. He gives you time to think. He's an excellent fighter, but that's a different kind of pressure. It's sort of like Canelo and David Benavidez, where Canelo gives you time to think. He's a great fighter, but he gives you time to think. Benavidez comes at you in a way where you got to fight him at a certain point. So I agree with you, Paulie, but I'm going to tell you something funny. Karan Davis is pretty good friends with Lubin, and I sent him to Lubin's camp a couple of times. And Karan is not complimentary of people's punching power. And he told me, he said, Karan has the best chin of any fighter I've ever trained. He's a really adorable kid. And he said to me, he said, Steve, Lubin can punch, bro. He said he can really punch.
Brett, I think Lubin's an underrated puncher.
Yes,
you're making my point. I was going to push back on Paulie about the Ramos fight, because listen, when you got a guy who's throwing heat, it makes you keep your hands at home. It makes you throw less punches. The guys who are volume guys, and then they fight a puncher that they actually respect their power. Listen, I've had guys whiz left hooks by my face, and I was like, you know what? I'm not getting hit tonight, because that thing was mean. I don't want that. And
you know what, Chris?
You got to think about that kind of thing with these kind of fights.
That's a great point, because I think Jesus Ramos won't admit this, but I think Lubin tamed him. I think Lubin hit him with something.
You guys don't.
The pressure wasn't coming as much as it should have been for him to be the pressure fighter. Whereas Fundora looks like a little bit of a nerdy schoolboy, but Fundora's an animal on the inside. So Lubin's power didn't discourage Fundora, but I think it discouraged Ramos a little bit. I honestly do.
I will agree there, but I'm just saying I don't think he can do that to Ortiz. Ortiz was down twice at Boachuk and still came back fighting. He will fight you.
Paulie, he might be able, so Ortiz might not take that. Like, he might not be the kind of guy like Ramos was, or the Jesus Ramos, where he's like, you know what, I'm going to sit back on it. Then he gets knocked out, potentially. Listen, if you're going to go in there, listen, Fundora has one of the best chins I've actually seen. I know we got dropped and knocked out by
you're making a point. I mean,
listen, Mendoza. But like, listen, he the guy is a beast, like you said, Fredman. He goes in there. He's willing to put his chin and his nose on the line. A couple things that you said, Fredman. My fight, when you talk about Jerusalem Bodyguard, when anyone pushes back on that fight, me winning or not winning that fight, I know immediately they don't know shit about boxing. Because if you watch that fight and think that I lost that fight, your mind is I don't know what you're watching. Really, without the first round,
the thing, Chris.
The fight wasn't even close.
Here's the thing. It was a close fight. I remember the fight very well. It was a close fight. It could have went. Some people like the pressure guys. Some people. I could remember Andre Ward telling the HBO telecast.
Yep.
I think Chris is winning this fight. I can remember that vividly. And what I was saying to myself, and I try to explain this to young kids, like, you don't have to win your rounds by a mile to win them. Just because Provodnikov is this big puncher and he blacked, Chris's eye and did all of this, it doesn't mean that he's winning the non-eventful rounds. It doesn't. Those rounds do count. And when you're the boxer, you want those rounds to count. And I think that's what happened with Lubin and the Ramos fights. There was a lot of non-eventful rounds, but we all know that the judges got to hand those scorecards in the same way he does the action rounds, and the average person doesn't realize how that works.
10-point must system, Brad. 10-point must system.
Yes, but even Freddie Roach in the last couple rounds of my fight was like, you need to knock him out. Like, you're losing this fight. Freddie said that. Freddie was aware of that. And so that's a whole different point. But this fight is a little bit different because, yeah, I agree with you, Bradman. I don't see this as boxer versus puncher, as in Ortiz is the puncher and Lubin is the boxer. Because I actually think Lubin's the better puncher. One punch power at 154. I think he's actually the better puncher.
Let me tell you something. I agree, Chris. I think that for single shot power, I think Lubin is the puncher. Lubin's problem is, and let's just be honest, can he take what that kid is throwing? That's the big question. Also, I just read that Lubin changed trainers. And I'm going to tell y'all something what I think about this. First of all, I think K. Ram is an excellent coach. But a lot of times people will say, well, a guy trains trainers, they need time to gel. But I have an alternate theory on that also. Every fight that I've ever worked with a guy, our first fight together, the guy always performed well. And the reason why is because when you have a new coach, you want to prove to him that you're worth his time. You want to be the best student you can. You do every single thing that he tells you to do because you want it to work. And I hope that Lubin and his coach did gel, because for me, that's always been a very productive situation where you get a guy and he wants to show you, he wants to listen, his ears are open. And a lot of times when guys don't listen, it's because of the complacency, and they've had that coach for years and years and years, and then they can't hear him anymore. They become a little bit worn out as far as that voice. So, you know, I've been hearing Lubin has a new coach. And I say, you know what? That can work. When a guy goes to a new coach, he seems to lock in, from my experience, and he wants to impress that coach. You know, but we got to see. This is a tough fight. It's an intriguing fight, but it's a very, very tough fight. I didn't even want to make a pick unless I knew who the judges was. That's how tough this fight is, for me, to be honest. And when I found out I was coming on here, the first thing I thought about was Paulie and Juan Diaz. I swear to God, I said, man, that's the first thing I thought about. I don't think people realize how hard it is to get a decision in Texas against a Texas fighter. I don't think they realize that. It's an extremely difficult task for Lubin tonight.
Hey, I'm old enough to remember Chavez Whitaker. Am I just me?
Just me? I was in
Texas. All right.
When I got a Diaz fight, I thought Chavez Whitaker.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we can just talk about that all day. Texas has had some historically bad decisions, and I think that might be Lubin's best chance to win, is to box. And I just don't know if he can if he's going to get credit for it.
When you look at this fight and the Vegas odds makers, they are probably talking about the line, Breadman, that you're talking about him walking, where it's, if he doesn't, at least some knockdowns. Does he have to be maybe more aggressive for a style, get some knockdowns, maybe stay in Ortiz's face a little bit more? Are there times as a coach where you're making adjustments based on what you think the judges are thinking? And will that happen in this fight to you, Breadman?
You know what, Jimmy? Sometimes you do, but against Jesus Ramos, I like the job that Kevin Cunningham did. He had his kid box. He know that Lubin has been in some tough fights, and they just let the chips fall where they were, and they wound up getting it. They wound up getting a decision. I remember Kevin was his coach for that fight, and I just don't know if Lubin can put his chin on the line as much as as much as he has in the past and still win this fight. I would be inclined to fight in a very disciplined, smart fight, and sort of taming Ortiz and letting it, if the judges screw him, at least everybody saw it. But I don't know if Lubin wants to, just slug in a fight like this, because it's an extremely difficult task that the young man has.
I don't think there's going to be moments where he has to choose a slug. He just has to pick them intelligently. I don't think he's going to be able to just dog walk Ortiz the whole fight. There's going to be moments where he's got to pick his moments to fight. And then
I think he will, Paulie. But you know what? I think that the key for Lubin is to touch Ortiz's body a little bit. Nobody really goes to pressure fighters' bodies. And I really believe that that's one of the ways where you kind of sap the gas tank a little bit and flatten the tires a little bit and wear the guy out a little bit for the second half of the fight. Lubin has a really good right hook. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm 90% sure that he's really right-handed. If you watch him fight, he's right-hand dominant. He has a really good right hook, and I think he has to hit Ortiz to the body a little bit and not be carried so fast. I know you know what I mean by that. He can't just be running all around the ring where he's running out of gas late in the fight. So I think he's going to have to. I think he's going to have to sort of tame him, but I wouldn't if I was him, I wouldn't be in extended, brutal exchanges. You know what I mean by that? Like that back and forth. He don't need that. He needs to get his stuff off and step off a little bit and then go back to his jab. Lubin has a big length advantage too, guys. I don't know if you guys noticed it, but Lubin, they're about the same height, but Lubin's arms are a lot longer. So I expect him, Ortiz has a good jab, but it might get canceled out a little bit with the southpaw orthodox stance. So I expect Lubin to have a good length advantage also.
Man, they might be the same height on paper, but in real life, I've been next to both of them. Lubin is taller.
Yeah.
He is, Paulie. I noticed that. They try to make him out to be the same height, but he's taller and longer. He is.
Hey, Breadman, I know you have a long night tonight. So do we. Thank you so much for jumping on with us, giving us your insight, my man. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Great boxing mind always gives us the X's and O's. You know, gentlemen, I like the way he put it, where he asked to box, but, are you going to win a boxing match in Texas? Are there times, Chris, where he's going to have to find that dog? But also, look at the flip side of the coin here. One of the things I try to explain, when I coach MMA, I've never coached boxing like you guys have, is, significant strikes are not created equal, right? They're not significantly the same. Some guys swell and bleed easily, and every time they get hit, it looks like an absolute massacre, even though they're outlanding the other guy. Chris, you made a point of saying that when Lubin lost Fundora, his face kind of, just gave out on him. It wasn't necessarily he was chinny, he didn't get knocked down easily. His face started giving out on him. I know a lot of fighters like that, and they have trouble a lot of times winning rounds because it always shows when they're getting hit. Could that be an issue in this fight, Chris?
So this has been addressed, and I think our CEO Gary Jonas and promoter of Erickson Lubin spoke about this, and at that point, Erickson Lubin was not as disciplined as he is now. He gained a lot of weight between fights, and swelling, inflammation can be exacerbated if you have a bad weight cut. Guys who cut a lot of weight swell really bad. I'm sure Gotti was notorious for this. The guy would cut a ton of weight, and he'd put on a ton of weight between the weigh-in and the fight. And his face would mark up easily. It would swell really badly, even when he wasn't getting hit with those kinds of shots. And Lubin really only had that issue in that one fight with Fundora. He didn't have much facial damage in the rest of his career. Since then, though, he has been really dedicated, and we've been around him. We've seen him. We saw him at the weigh-in. He looked phenomenal. He's been in shape. Even the first interview they did, where they did a face-to-face, you saw them together. Ortiz actually looked like the guy who was very overweight and needed to cut down and slim out. And Lubin looked like he was almost in fight shape at that point. And that was months before this fight, and it was before the training
angular camp. Face. We can see his collarbones every time we see it. Chris, you know what I'm talking about? As a nutrition guy, you see the little things, right, that tell me this guy's really, as you said, in fight. It looks angular. It's how he's looked for months.
He was locked in. He's been locked in. And I don't necessarily, you never know. I mean, the way punches affect people's faces is what it is. But, in that particular fight, and like we said, he was coming back in that fight. He dropped Fundora, and it wasn't his shin that failed him that night. It was his face. It was his skin. Is that going to be a factor tonight? It could be. But when we're talking about in terms of this boxer puncher and getting respect early, Breadman made a great point about the right hook of Erickson Lubin. I'm not sure that he's actually right-handed. He punches really well with both hands. I've seen him knock guys clean out with his left or his right.
With the right hook, right?
I don't remember if it was that shot, but I've seen him knock out guys with both hands. Good guys, world-class guys at 54. Regardless, he can punch with both hands. When you can punch, you can punch, and Lubin can punch. But that right hook specifically is a really deadly shot for a guy who fights like Victor Ortiz, Virgil Ortiz. I always say Victor. Virgil Ortiz. He's coming in behind that jab. And I think now, more than ever, at 54, Virgil's more of a boxer. He works behind his jab, gets himself in position, and lets loose with the body shots, especially left hook downstairs. And he's very aggressive, which leaves openings for the counters. That right hook is going to be there. And the question is, who has the better chin? Maybe it's Virgil. Who has the better power? Maybe it's Lubin. But it's all relative. It's power versus chin. Just like Breadman said, it was a perfect analogy. Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. Mike had more power, but Evander had a better chin. So it equalized and actually worked out in Evander's favor, who scored the knockout that night. So there's a lot of questions that are going to be answered in this fight very early on, depending on what we see and how these guys react to each other.
When you look at it, Paulie, I mean, I know you studied it. I know you, just like the rest of us, the Bohachuk fight for Virgil Ortiz Jr. Remember, he was knocked down early in that fight, had to, come back, got it back with his physical pressure. Can he afford that kind of a start tonight against a more experienced guy?
I don't think it's ever good to be able, even if you can afford it, I don't think it's ever good to get off on the wrong foot, right? I mean, I think ultimately he would rather get off to a better start. I think he looks at that as a learning experience, and maybe he wants to get off to a better start, get off to a faster start. Also, you want to test out Lubin. He's a little bit older, maybe a little bit shop worn. If you put some gas on him early on, how does Lubin react? I think Lubin's gonna fight. I know Lubin. The sentiment is he's got a box leg, but I think Lubin can be sucked into a firefight here in this fight.
I don't think he needs to just box. I think he has to do both. Everyone keeps talking about that.
But I think Ortiz is going to make a point to start fast. And I honestly got a feeling that Lubin wants to make a point as well. He's got a chip on his shoulder here, the way he's been, just the energy I sense from him. So I think Ortiz wants to get off to a good start. I think Lubin wants to get off to a good start. So I think that means fireworks early on. That's sort of the way I'm looking at it. Plus that Texas crowd, they get into a frenzy pretty quickly. I think this fight's going to start pretty fast, personally, my opinion.
Yeah, one of those things, man. The Mexican and Mexican American crowd, that Tejano crowd, it's electric every time. We've called fights in Texas. It's a very passionate fan base. They understand the fighters and the fights, and 90% of
got a feeling
exactly, huh? It's that kind of crowd that gets behind their fighters and their fights, and this idea that the start might tell us how this one is going to go. Where Chris, do you see it as certain rounds are decided in the first, certain fights are decided in the first 4 rounds. Certain ones are decided in the middle 4. Some are decided at the late 4. Where would you say the deciding rounds are going to be in this fight? Just off the top of your head, because certain guys, it's how they start. They tend to fight how they start. Other guys, they start slow. Mayweather was a notoriously slow starter. He would win in the back half of fights. What's your thought on this one?
I'm telling you right now, as soon as that first bell rings, don't go get popcorn. This could be over early in either direction. I don't think I agree with Paul. I don't know if there's going to be feeling out. And I think that the power is enough for both these guys, relatively, power chins, that this fight could be explosive. It could be short. It could be fun. It could be really fun. But I can see this going a lot of different ways. Like, I know it's crazy and kind of hyperbolic, but like, it could be like a Hagler-Hearns situation where these guys come out guns blazing and this fight's over before we really even get settled. I wouldn't be that surprised by that. I could also see it starting kind of slow and kind of building, which I think would help Virgil more than it would help Lubin. This is one of those fights because it's such an interesting stylistic matchup for so many different reasons. Styles, who they are, where they're at in their careers, stances, power, chin, all these different things that we've all been talking about for the last 25 minutes. Makes you really think about this fight and how it can go in a lot of different ways it can go. I don't know if we're going to have an exact answer right away, but I think we're going to test a lot of variables early on in this fight.
And Paulie, this idea that Boots Ennis is going to be in the crowd, and over again, Lubin has been asked about this idea of, Boots can't wait to challenge Ortiz. That I don't want to say stepping stone, but he's the next fight in line. And Ortiz has tried to say, hey, no, I'm not looking past this guy. But Lubin has tried to use as putting a chip on his shoulder. Do you think that has any effect on it? Not necessarily his motivation, how he approaches this fight. He feels a little bit disrespected.
I think if you're Lubin, you take anything as a motivation. When you're the B side, you want to feel disrespected in a lot of ways. I think that's part of your motivation, being the B side in general. So I think
we saw that last night with Delonte Tiger Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then Michael Jordan used to do it. I think it's just a natural B-side mentality is to sort of use that as me against the world mentality and to sort of push yourself, motivate yourself, because you are up against it.
Hey, Coach Garcia, great to have you. Thanks for joining us, Coach Robert Garcia. How you doing, my man? I know you got a busy night tonight.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we just walked into the locker room right now. So yeah, everything's set. We're gonna get started in a few minutes.
Well, rather than give away your whole game plan, which I know you're not going to do anyway, the vibe coming in, this idea of everything peaking at the right time, the lead up, all of this, how do you feel about the peak of your fighter right now? He is fighting in a few hours. That peak, the lead up, the camp ending right now. How's the lead up been to this fight?
Everything went well. Camp went well. Sparring partners did a great job. Cut weight was incredible. We had a great cut weight, no problem at all. didn't struggle to make weight that bad like normally everybody does. So everything's good. Everything's lined up. He's actually told us this morning that this is the best he's ever felt physically, mentally. He's prepared. We know we're in a great test. We know Lubin is going to give us a great test, and that's the we pass this one, we go to the bigger ones after this. That's the way it is. But we're not looking past Lubin. We have to know that Lubin is a real deal. He's a solid opponent, and we have to go out there and get the job done.
Robert, do you guys look at this fight as the biggest test of his career? You mentioned this is a test. I know you both respect Lubin, and his abilities and his experience quite a bit. Is this going into this fight as a team? Do you guys look at this as the biggest test of Virgil's career?
Look, I think it is a test, but I can't say the biggest test of his career, because I think just the fact that his last fight was against Madrimov. I think that was a bigger test, especially with Madrimov's performance against Crawford. It was a great test for us. I think the test that we're going to face is Lubin's experience and power. That's the test that we're going to experience, that we're going to have to pass, because the other, I think Madrimov is a much smarter, more talented fighter, but as power and experience, I think this is going to be our test.
Coach Garcia, when you look at the physical abilities of Lubin, this is a guy you respect a lot. Every time I've seen them across from one another, they've been complimentary of one another's skills. But one thing that's kind of getting overlooked, and we've been talking about it on this show, we had Breadman Edwards on, and he was talking about the punching power of Lubin at 154 pounds. He's a natural 154 pounder. He has good knockout power with either hand. This idea that a lot of people think Ortiz are going to walk through the punches of Lubin, I know that's not what you guys train for. Talk about that respect you have for the finishing ability of Erickson Lubin.
Not at all. We actually have to. We prepared very well. We know Lubin is the real deal in front of us. We respect his skills, his power. So we train to fight a great fight, perfect fight, because it's not a walk in the park. It's not what other people think. Lubin is a real deal. He's a very experienced fighter. He's been in there in this division for many years. He's already faced against the best in the division. So he's one of the most dangerous guys that we've probably faced. Probably in danger. He's probably the most dangerous fighter we've ever faced. So it's a great challenge for us too. We are not looking past him. That's why we haven't even talked about the fights ahead. I know there's a lot of talk about Boots being here and everything. I've already gave you guys my opinion, but look, we're focused right now and not looking past them.
For people listening, Robert, you gave your opinion. You don't think Boots actually wants that fight. So if anyone hasn't seen that interview, I wanted to make sure that anyone watching right now understands where you were coming from with that. And I think that's a really powerful statement that you made, and very well might hold some truth. So anyone listening who didn't understand what Robert was talking about, that was it.
Eddie Hearn wants that fight more than Boots does. Eddie Hearn is the one pushing for it, is the one kind of forcing Boots and his team. I know they don't want it, and they might be forced to it, because if everything goes well tonight with us, that might be our next fight. More likely, it probably will be our next fight, and they're gonna force him to do this. So he's not gonna be able to say, "Oh no, I want something else," because he's already forced. But in reality, it's Eddie Hearn that's pushing for this fight, and he's the one that's kind of forcing Boots to take it.
Robert, you said Virgil felt like this was his best camp of his career. Do you agree with that? The way he's been looking in camp, have you seen the differences? You personally seen differences in Virgil from other camps? Because he's always sharp and ready.
He's always in great shape. Always trains his ass off. I think what he meant to after the weigh-in yesterday, today in the morning, the best he's felt is physically after the weigh-in, like cutting weight and stuff. Not training. He always trains hard. He always has great sparring sessions. We always pick the right guys to train with them. I got so many in my gym that I don't have to bring anybody from outside. Everything stays in-house, and we always have great sparring for for Virgil. So that's not the no. He didn't say this is the best camp he's had. He said this is the best he's ever felt making weight and the day after the weigh-in. There a lot of fighters and himself in the past, especially after his health issues, he told us that this is the best he's ever felt. So that's a big plus for us. That's a big more motivation for us and to go out there and go do our work.
Robert, the reason I'm asking is because it could be said that Boachuk got something taken out of him by Virgil. That Virgil versus Boachuk fight was a fight of the year candidate. I mean, that was a world war, right? So and now Boachuk just got beat by Adams. I don't take credit away from Adams, but Adams was losing the first fight pretty handily before he knocked out Boachuk, sort of a home run kind of shot. But this time he was actually able to sort of beat up on Boachuk. And, it could be one of the theories could be that Virgil took a lot out of Boachuk in that fight. Any worries that Virgil also could be a little bit worn down from a fight like that, or do you think he's just so young that he just goes through through shots like that and through fights like that?
Well, look, I think Virgil's performance against Adrimov showed that he still has a lot left. Adrimov was after Bohachako, so the performance Virgil had was one of those performances that honestly, let's be real, like very few people expected Virgil to dominate the way he did and fight the way he did, because he wasn't just a typical brawler like everybody thinks Virgil is. He actually boxed really.
It looks like we lost Coach, but Coach, thank you so much for joining us. He has a busy night tonight with his fighter, so of course has to get back in the locker room to take care of his guy and warm him up and get ready because he fights in a couple hours. Gentlemen, the physical side of this, and one of the things that I noticed Coach Garcia talking about, Chris, was easy cut. Didn't have to worry about the cut. Once again, we saw him in Fresno, and he's a big 154-pounder. So the physical side of this, he isn't beaten up by the training, because sometimes everything goes right, but he's still a little bit physically beaten up. Sometimes everything goes right, but the cut isn't great. Physically, a fully on-point Virgil Ortiz, that's a scary guy, Chris.
Well, I'm gonna say a couple things about this, because I've actually trained in the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy, and it's rough. I actually learned how to develop a training camp based on what I learned out there in terms of the structure of how they do a camp. It's very systematic. It's incredible, actually. It's the Navy SEALs of boxing training is how Robert operates his gym. Maybe things have changed since then, since when I was there 15 years ago. Regardless, I'm sure the work ethic is still there. I'm sure the availability of the strength training and the recovery is there, and it's only gotten better. I'm absolutely sure about that. And I've actually talked to Ortiz's team when he was going through his health crisis, making 147, talking about nutrition stuff and things like that. I am going to assume that Virgil Ortiz, one, based on his maturity, just growing into the sport, and his the way that he approaches his camps, from what you and I saw, Jimmy, when we met him firsthand, and the fact that Robert is the best, most well-established trainer in the world today, and is probably going to get Trainer of the Year once again based on his stable, that he is actually telling the truth. Because I say it all the time. Every fighter says, it's the best training camp of my life. I feel the best I've ever felt. No one's ever going to say, like, I rolled my ankle in the beginning of camp. I had trouble with the weight. My elbows bother me. That's never going to come out. So a lot of times the guy says, it's the best training camp of my life. And then after the fight, they go, yeah, the weight cut was really fun. I actually do believe Virgil when he says it's the best training camp of his life. Because I think he's really figuring this out. This is his third world-class fight at 154. Because he had a couple before, and they were basically blowing up 40-pounders and 47-pounders, and he kept mowing them down the way he did 47-pounders. But then he fought Bohachuk, and then he fought Madrimov, and then now he's fighting Lubin. And if you just take the way he looked going from Bohachuk to Madrimov, you see a stark difference. And the getting accustomed to the weight class really matters. And there's a lot to say about that. So momentum-wise, competitiveness-wise, he's really in a good place. He's really in the driver's seat. And from what I have seen, talking to Robert and talking to Virgil himself, they really respect Lubin, and they understand how dangerous of a fight this is. And that tells me that they are going to be ultimately prepared. And this is going to be the best version of Virgil Ortiz that we've ever seen. Question is, will that actually be enough? Because Lubin, as coach said, is that dangerous.
Well, I'm going to throw in a screwball that I was trying to throw at Robert, but we lost him. Screwball I'm going to throw is, yes, he used the Madrimov performance as something to overcome. Okay, we had Madrimov after Bochuk. We look great. What I'm hearing grumblings through boxing, and again, could be just rumors, that card, when Madrimov fought Virgil, Madrimov was very sick. A lot of guys in Riyadh got sick that week. That's the week Schofield pulled out being sick as well. Something was going around in Riyadh, I was told. And Madrimov actually did fight sick against Virgil. Now, obviously, I'm hearing it in hindsight and not in foresight. But like you said, Champ, everything comes out later, right? So that's why I wanted to hear directly from Robert how he felt Virgil looked. Is Virgil looking that good himself? Because it's one thing if Virgil feels it or says it, but I wanted to see from Robert himself what he was noticing. Because to me that makes a difference. Because if what I'm hearing, again, it could be just rumors, but what I'm hearing about Madrimov being sick that week, and that was a weird week in Riyadh. Because again, I'll reiterate, that's the week Schofield also pulled out of being sick. There was a bug going around, it seems like, in Riyadh that week. If that's the case, then you have to rely more on the eyes of Robert in camp, more so than what we're saying is the performance against Madrimov, and know that the Bochuk performance doesn't take something out of both guys. Because again, it could be said that something was taken out of Bochuk in that fight.
So let's flip it around a little bit, Paul. Let me start with you. We obviously called Lubin's last fight against Adriel Holmes. Before that was Jesus Ramos. Before that was Luis Arias. What do you think of the fights he's had leading up to this fight? We talked about Virgil Ortiz and Bohocuk and Madrimov. What do you think about the lead up for Erickson Lubin? Is he where you think he should be heading into this fight, Paulie? Because like I said, we called it.
I'll say I think that it was a knock the rust off fight against Adriel Holmes. Also, Adriel Holmes is a little bit of a stinker. Fights, there are guys that don't fight to win, they fight not to lose, and they're kind of stinkers, I feel like Holmes, that's the kind of fight he was fighting. And also, Lubin was shaking off the rust. I think once Lubin did shake off the rust, he turned it up another gear and got the stoppage. If you look at the guy who fought Adriel Holmes, then he doesn't have a chance against Virgil Ortiz tonight. But I think that was a knock the rust off fight. If you look at Virgil and you look at Lubin, and Champ, I think you'll agree with this too, as you're more intuitive on this stuff than me. Even Lubin's body looks different this fight than it did against Adriel Holmes. He prepared in a much more focused way. It seemed like against Adriel Holmes, he was just doing a training camp to get in shape, get back.
That was a get back into shape fight for sure. And he had a guy in front of him that he could do that.
Yeah, and while this camp, it seemed like he started camp in shape, and he came to camp to actually sharpen up for a particular opponent. And that's a big difference. It may sound similar to regular the layman fan at home, but
it's not at all.
Yeah, very, very big difference.
Jimmy, and I think I know where you were going. You were leading, with that question. In terms of momentum, where these guys are at, Virgil's light years ahead of Lubin. The fights that he has had at 154 in his last couple fights, the Madrimov, which is a high intellect, tactical, strategic fight that he dominated and looked phenomenal and showed different facets of his game. The Bohocuk fight, which Bohocuk was an absolute nightmare to fight at that point. And listen, we talk about the Brandon Adams fight. Brandon just might have his number. That happens. That happens historically. Some guys just styles don't match up.
The first time Brandon had to land a home run punch, he was hopelessly behind. This time Brandon beat him up.
But Paulie, he's already been knocked out by this guy. So PTSD could play a part in that, because Bohocuk looked phenomenal in every fight, except when he fights Brandon Adams. He can't fucking beat that guy. Anyway, but you look at those two fights and
give credit to Brandon. Brandon's a good fighter too.
Brandon's a very good fighter. No, we're not knocking him at all. He's an excellent fighter. But he was a guy who was completely dominated by Charlo, like dominated. Didn't win a round, didn't win a second of that fight. And he lost to Katsarakis, the Greek prospect who's turning contender. Good fight though, very good fight. So you look at where these guys are coming from momentum wise in a recent form, and Paul, and you're going to get this. I think some of the listeners are going to get this. When you are operating at a high level and an elite level in fights, you're better. Boom, 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 boom. You're fighting. And that's what happens when all these young prospects, all these young guys I talk to in gyms, are like, I just want my shot. I'm like, are you ready? Because you win, it goes up. You win, and it goes up. It ratchets, 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 ratchets. So if you're not ready to go to the absolute moon, you're not ready. And the way Virgil's been moving in these last couple fights, he is ratcheting up each and every time. And Lubin has been kind of status quo in terms of his opposition. Arias, yeah, he gives guys trouble. Yes, like he stopped them, which was good. Most guys don't. He went 12 with Danny Jacobs back in 2017 or 18, whatnot. Arger Holmes, just a disruptor. The guy wasn't there to win. And he spent a lot of time out of the ring. So in terms of momentum, I think Virgil really has that in his corner more so than Lubin does.
So essentially, the question marks are a lot more on the Lubin side because of that opposition, where I can tell you more about how good Virgil Ortiz is. And like you said, Paulie, there are rumors that Madrigal may have been ill that night, other things like that. Bohachuk, very close fight, all this stuff. But this idea of we have a better sense of maybe where Virgil Ortiz is heading in this fight than we do about where Erickson Lubin is. Paulie, is that fair?
Yeah, I think Chem made a really good point. Virgil is operating in that mental headspace where it's constant danger. And so your mental headspace is almost at a point where you don't even get to enjoy the success you're having because you've got to constantly stay in that headspace of being switched on all the time. And it seems like Virgil does a really good job of that. That in and of itself is part of the challenge of being a world-class athlete, is always having to stay psychologically switched on. Because you almost, when you're like that, I'm telling you, you almost don't get to enjoy the moment. You actually enjoy looking back on it. Maybe years later, you're like, wow, it's like, I was so in the moment, I didn't get to really enjoy that. But if you let yourself enjoy it, it actually unswitches you. It switches you off, and then it's hard to get switched back on and be able to compete at that level. So it's a catch-22 there. Virgil does a really good job of staying switched on. He's one of these. There's just certain guys that a lot of Eastern Europeans do it, but a lot of top Western fighters like Terrence Crawford does a really good job of it as well.
Yeah.
Virgil Ortiz seems like he does a really good job. Floyd Mayweather was that kind of guy. Sugar Ray Leonard. Special fighters can do that, and I still believe that you don't get to enjoy the moment fully when it's like that, but man, that's the price of success as well, because it's such a high level. You've got to stay psychologically switched on all the time, not just in camp. And of course, you keep yourself in the headspace.
Champ, that point that you just made, I've never heard anyone put it that way, that spoke so true to what's reality. That's why I love these shows, because we say these things and I'm just like, man, I lived that. And I remember being like that, living in the constant state of danger, the anxiety level at 99 at all times, but loving it and having no joy other than getting my hand raised. And it hurt me during my career because of my, using a term that you use all the time, my shoemaker promoter.
Shoemaker, yep.
Couldn't get me consistently fighting. And I lost a lot of my prime living in that anxiety-ridden, locked in, ready to fire on anything at any moment opportunity. Listen, I became known as a guy who fought everybody, and that was part of the reason, because I was always ready to be in danger. Because I always felt like I was in danger. I always felt like I was like, I'm ready. And I talk about this on a lot of our shows on ProBox too. Earlier in your career, when you get 5-6 fights in 1 year, and every fight rolls into its camp, and you just get exponentially better, the same thing happens later in your career when you get the world-class level. Because now the fights aren't as close. You're not fighting as often. But the camps roll into each other because you're staying ready at all times. Because the next opponent is going to be a step up. That ratcheting up. That's how you get better and better and better and better. You just stay firing on all cylinders. And you talk about a guy like Terrence Crawford, consistently living in camp, going from fight to fight, living as a warrior at all times. And when you do finally sit back and look back and start kind of patting yourself on the back and being like, man, that was a good fight. It's already over. You can't experience the joy of a fight career until you're well past it. I'm still having trouble experiencing the joy of my career. I just retired a couple years ago, and I'm still having trouble looking back and being like, yeah, man, you did it.
But it's a necessity too, because it's actually what keeps you training between fights. If you're in that constant state of danger, it keeps you psychologically switched on, and it keeps you wanting to train. Otherwise, because I felt like that's one of my regrets of my career, is that I let making money give myself too many breaks between fights. But it could have also been the injuries. I had a lot of hand injuries. I had to take breaks, but nonetheless, I feel like the fighters that stay switched on like that, it's why they train all year round. It's why guys like Mayweather and Crawford always are in the gym, because that mental switch on, you realize that, like you called it, champ, constant state of danger. You feel a heightened sense of danger. What does
Anxiety.
that height of danger and anxiety bring you to? It makes you train. Makes you train because you want to be ready all the time. You say, "Oh, these guys might beat me. Oh my goodness, these guys might beat me." You never. It's funny because guys like Mayweather show the ultra confidence, but you need that healthy fear to keep you training all the time, to keep you training and to keep you training because you feel that danger, and it's a healthy fear. I remember Teddy Atlas, he talked about it in his book. It's even Rocky V, the fire, is it going to consume you or you're going to consume it? I feel like that's heightened sense of danger. If you know how to program it correctly, it keeps you hyper focused, training all the time. And I feel like Virgil always is in hyper focus mode. He looked big when we saw him in Fresno, so maybe he's not always on weight per se, but it's like this
He
kid.
didn't look bad though. He looked big because
he
he's a big guy.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you,
gentlemen. The great Russian wrestler Alexander Karelin, if you know him, Greco-Roman, undefeated for 20 years, whatever it was. I had a coach tell me,
an American. Got beat by an American.
Rulon Gardner.
Rulon Gardner.
I had a coach tell me one time, he said, to a guy like that, he steps on the mat and he's last year's champion. Whatever he won, I'm a world champion. When he walks off the mat, that's last year's champion to him.
Yep.
He never takes it with him.
Past successes don't ensure victory today.
The moment his hand drops after winning the Olympics, that's the last.
Back to the gym.
The best athletes, that's what keeps them training. They don't live on their laurels. They live in the fear of losing what they've accomplished. While the fighters or the athletes in general who start to fall off quicker are the ones who live off their laurels, like, oh, my greatness and their money and reading their headlines in the newspapers and so on and so forth. Living in fear, it's kind of messed up. I feel, because you never get to enjoy your success, but you'll have more of it. You'll have more success. And I feel like only a special fighter can balance that out. And Virgil has that potential.
Champ, when you were talking about that, about the fear of not being able. So my fear, I was one of those guys who stayed in the gym at all times. I was, I would fight on Saturday, and as long as I wasn't too hurt, I was back in the gym or on the road on Monday. And that was my entire career. And everyone around me who watched me grow up knew that. And I was always in shape. I'm still always in shape. People always recognize that, notice that. And mine was based on fear as well. Mine was fear and anxiety and staying in a state of danger. My fear was because I was such a late entry into boxing, that I was an outsider that no one wanted to give respect to. My first boxing match, not pro or amateur, my first boxing match, I was 24 years old. So I always felt like I was behind the 8 ball, and I needed to work double time in order to get to the championship level. And again, it was my promotion and legal troubles that kept me out of a lot of my prime. But I was always trying to stay ready. Like you'd see me after a 2-year layoff and being like, "Hey man, where you been? You retired?" People thought I retired, and people thought that it was my lack of wanting to fight. People are like, "Oh, he doesn't want to fight. He hasn't fought in 2 years." No, it was never that. It was the situations that were affecting me outside of the ring. But I always stayed ready because of that reason. I wanted to stay switched on. I wanted to stay in that state of danger and uncomfortability, because I always performed the best when I was uncomfortable, and I felt like I had my back against the wall. And you see certain fighters, like all the guys you were talking about. I wasn't one of those guys who's trying to celebrate before the thing was over. Even now, I'm having trouble celebrating my career.
You want to hear a great quote, guys? Fame is the food the dead eat. It doesn't. Yeah, fame, great. When I'm dead, I'm famous. Great. It doesn't help me now. Fame is the food the dead eat. Doesn't do anything for us.
That's deep.
I like that.
Yeah, but it's this idea that, as you're saying, like, yeah, I'll look back on that when I'm done and go, yeah, that was great. If I'm in it, it's the next thing, because it doesn't put food on the table. Me going, yeah, man, that was great. I did wonderful things. You get caught up in those wonderful things rather than the next accomplishment. And it's that next accomplishment that drives great guys forward. You know what I mean? And so it was in the history context that I read it. It was about something like Billy the Kid or something, is where I read this quote where it's like, yeah, he died at 21. It doesn't help him that he's famous now. Like, he led a young, violent, horrible death. So the idea that he's famous now and he's a big deal doesn't help him now. He's dead. It's that same thing. All right. Okay, Karoma, great for joining us, man. Thank you so much, Coach. I know you're busy tonight. First off, how's everything doing? How's your fighter feeling now that it's fight night and it's a couple hours away?
Oh man, I appreciate you guys having me on here. Everything is good. I mean, Lubin's been here before. I've been here before. It's about rising to the occasion, being prepared, and being focused. Right now we're there.
Coach
We
K,
just
man,
talked to.
thanks,
Yeah,
thanks,
go ahead.
thanks for joining us. You said Lubin's been here before, you've been here before, but you guys have not been here together before. How has the camp gone? How is the synergy working? Where are you guys at in terms of being this close to the fight? What are the energy levels like?
She's great. I mean, Erickson is a kid that I watched grow up, you know what I'm saying, since he was a kid. He was around my group of kids growing up, you know what I'm saying? A couple of my athletes looked up to him. They were very close. He's a kid that I would always watch at Silver Gloves, at JOs and stuff like that. We would always conversate. And even the course of his pro career, while he was doing good and when he was doing bad, we would always talk and stuff like that. So coming into camp was very simple. You know what I'm saying? It was just like being around somebody that knew you forever. And so, knowing the things that he had lost along the way, because of the light, the fame, the crowd, the voices, it was like just kind of trying to bring that back to what made him him. And I think he went away from that, a lot of that. And, the discipline and the focus. And you know how it gets, man. Some of you guys, Paulie, y'all been there. The friends, the lights, the attention that you get so early. It takes you to a different place. And I think the place that Erickson's now at is like, I have to get over the hump. Why can't I get over the hump? And he has to get over the hump. And so that's where we're at today.
Yeah, that's the conversation we were having, Kay. Sometimes you enjoy it too much, and sometimes I hate to say it, sometimes not enjoying it is the best way to go about it because you live in that constant state of heightened security, state of heightened fear, and that you can be knocked off this perch. Erickson, not for a guy who's not won a world title, has been at world class level for a decade, man. I mean,
Yes.
he's been a perennial contender, a perennially dangerous contender who's beaten champions, just not when they were champions.
Yes.
Has the conversation come up in camp about that, where he's getting to that point where, he needs to accomplish this or he wants to accomplish this? Because, obviously we know Lubin is a championship level fighter. Like I'll reiterate, he's beaten champions, just not when they had the belts. Where is the headspace at in terms of that conversation?
Well, I think the headspace was just being honest. You know what I'm saying? Just being honest with him. Like you said, you've been there. You've been there. You've been championship material for years, but you didn't get over that hump. You know what I'm saying? You've beaten people that they said were meant to be world champions and you knocked them off. But then when you got there, what happened? And that's what I said. That's what comes with the, like you said, embracing it, but not embracing it. And that's what I told Erickson. Like, you embraced it the wrong way. You took advantage of your talent. You know what I'm saying? And I said, you have to pray on it. You have to pray on God and ask God, like, I apologize, for what you gave me. And I took it for granted. I let people come in and infiltrate my mind and make me think I'm bigger than what I am. You know what I'm saying? But I wasn't there yet. You know what I'm saying? I think even though he wasn't there yet, being that he still had that hunger, it kept him, like you said, Paulie, always being able to knock off the contenders, always able to knock off the prospects, always able to knock off the next guy that's meant to go over him. But then when we got to the guy, I think him being able to knock off the contenders, the prospects and the contenders and stuff like that, I think that's what he just got. He settled. He settled. And so when it came for that belt moment, it's like, oh, whoa, what do I do? I don't have the answer. You know what I'm saying? And then now you can't look around at the people around you like, what's the answer? Because they just followed you. They've been on your back. And I try to tell them, like, at the end of the day, it's about you. It's not about nobody else. It's about you. And you're the one that goes in there and you're the one that puts in the work. But if you cheat yourself, you're going to find out the outcome. And I think that's where we're at today, where he says, you know what, I have cut a lot of corners. And this camp, I didn't cut no corners. I wanted to see how it feels to actually do what people have been telling me, like, yo, why don't you just be a little bit more disciplined? Why don't you get away from everybody? Why don't you leave home? And you got to find out what works for real. And I think he's tried everything else, and now he realizes this is my big moment. I know I can be a world champion, and I'm going to be a world champion.
Okay,
Coach,
I'll
thank
put you
you
on the
so
spot.
much.
Well, I'm gonna
Yeah.
put you on the spot. You look in his eyes. Do you see it? Do you
I'm
see
going to be
it?
honest with you, man. I'm not even going to lie to you, Paulie. Like, I'm going to be real with you. Like, yeah, like when you sit down and hear this kid talk now, it's like he starts crying. Like he starts crying about like how he's overlooked shit. You know, he starts crying about, I watched kids that looked up to me pass me. You know what I'm saying? He talks about it. And when he talks about it, like he really feels it. Like the other day, we was in his room and he started talking. He was talking about 30 minutes and he says, you know what, man, I got to pray right now.
Mm.
He just got on the floor and just started praying. And he was like, I'm not going to take this for granted. I promise you. He says, I promise you, Kay. I'm not going to take this moment for granted. I'm going to shine.
All
I'm
right.
going to show
Hey,
everybody what I can
I'm
do.
excited now. I'm excited.
No, I mean,
Coach.
it's real because, like Paulie, Chris, y'all been there. You've been the underdog.
Yeah.
You've questioned yourself sometimes. Maybe I shouldn't have stayed up late. Maybe I should have went to bed.
It's a
Maybe I
human
shouldn't have ate this.
psychology. Okay,
Yeah.
people look at these fighters like, oh, but in the privacy of all of our own rooms, that fear, that regret sometimes is the biggest motivator.
Yeah.
It's more so than the pats on the back.
But see, that's the thing. I think, so many people, they wait for you to fall to tell you the truth, instead of telling you the truth when you're above. And you know what I'm saying? That's what I think, Erickson, our talks during camp, it's like, he would just be, 7 days, 7 days. He didn't miss no days, didn't rest. He's like, I want it, I want it, I want it. The sparring was incredible. Things that challenge him, you know what I'm saying? Put him back to that level where, Erickson was a smart, intelligent fighter. He had a great IQ.
Mhm.
And he got carried away with the power. You got to think about it. The power has saved him in many big fights. You know what I'm saying? Like even the Fundora fight, the power saved him. You see what I'm saying? But if we had went to skills and IQ, it would have made him really, really get it. You know what I'm saying? And
Coach,
so
it seems
now,
like you have your guy in exactly the right mental place for this fight, man. I know we could talk to you forever, and I know you got to get back
yeah,
to your guy, man. Thank you so much for your time.
man,
It has been
appreciate you
great, and
guys.
best of luck to you and your team, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
All right, Coach K, do your thing.
Appreciate
Good
it.
seeing you. I'll see you
All right,
soon.
brother. Thank you so much.
It's one of those things where some guys have all the skill in the world. They need to put it all together and have the right mentality and have it appear. It sounds like Coach
You're like
K.
Mr. Music today. The electric slide before. Now some guys have all the love.
Some guys
Some
do,
guys
right?
do nothing but
Some guys
complain.
have all the pain. It's the
Woo,
way it
woo,
goes. It's a
woo.
message in life. But it seems like he has him, mentally in the right place for this fight. It seems like that's what he needs, even more than the technique, is having everything, Paulie, as you said, lined up mentally. And it looks like Coach K has that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because I really appreciate him having that discussion with us about the heart-to-heart talks that he's had with Erickson. It really puts it into perspective for the fan at home that, a fighter who's had the successes of Erickson will still feel that emptiness because he's not achieved that championship that has sort of slipped away from him in different parts. And you see some of the things that Erickson has talked about and some of the regrets and whatnot. And it hits home. I feel like when athletes become relatable to the regular people, it becomes easier to root for them. It becomes easier to understand them, and obviously Virgil's a fan favorite for a reason, man. I mean, the kid is a machine. He's exciting and whatnot, but there's a story here with Lubin as well. And I think, for people that are just maybe looking at him as, oh, Lubin is just preparing Virgil for Jaron Ennis, you can sort of get a peep into the psychology of Lubin going into this fight. Will it make a difference? I mean, it's still a tough ask. Beating Virgil Ortiz right now is still a very tough ask, but you get at least the peek into the psychology of Lubin going into tonight's fight. And that is some deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts, and we bring him, and we'll be bringing him post-fight. Remember that. Join us post-fight. Check it out on DAZN. And then post-fight will be right here at ProBox TV, ready to go. And remember, here at ProBox TV, we have another fight coming up for you. November 21st is our next day on the road. Veron versus Villa, Aguilar versus Lopez. Friday, November 21st. That's right here, South Florida, Fort Lauderdale. Now, finally, a fight we can drive to. It is going to be an absolutely outstanding card. Well, don't forget, Thanksgiving, eating a lot of food? Well, work it out with us. That's right, November 29th. That one is in Fresno, California. It is Magdaleno versus Yakubov. Also, Badillo versus Soto on that one, November 29th. Remember, from Fresno, California, the San Joaquin Valley. So, Jimmy Smith alongside the champs, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi. Check out the fight on DAZN. Post-main event right back here. ProBox TV will break it all down for you. Enjoy the fights. We'll see you afterward.
Jimmy, I better not get